Steve Bannon is chief advisor to the President of the United States, and often he's called racist. He bragged about how Breitbart, the website that he ran, was the home of the alt-right, that's for white supremacists, and almost everyone agrees to that, except some in the alt-right. Some in the alt-right are proud of being white supremacists, and others say, no, that's slightly unfair. I mean, we're Judeo-Christian supremacists, we're supremacists of different ilks, etc. Okay, so is Steve Bannon really racist? Well, we might settle that today because Paul Blumenthal in Huffington Post did some wonderful research. So first, he noticed that Steve Bannon kept talking about this thing called the Camp of the Saints. Here, let me give you Bannon's quotes on it, and then we'll tell you what the Camp of the Saints is. You're going to want to know, okay? So he says, back in October 2015, Bannon does, it's been almost a Camp of the Saints type invasion into Central and then Western and Northern Europe, referring to immigration there from the non-European parts of the world. He said again in January 2016, the whole thing in Europe is all about immigration. It's a global issue today, this kind of global Camp of the Saints. One more, again in January 2016, it's not a migration, it's really an invasion. I call it the Camp of the Saints. And it goes on and on and on, constant reference to Camp of the Saints. I just gave you three to give you a sense of it, okay? And it is not immigration, it's an invasion. So what in the world is this thing? It turns out it's an obscure novel from 1973, it's a French novel called The Camp of the Saints. And it is about an invasion of the white world and the end of the white world when non-white people come to Europe. Oh, wow. That's interesting. Now, this is apparently popular in the alt-right. It's been popular in the far right for a long time in Europe and America. Very rich right-wing philanthropists fund to reprint this from time to time. So even if it's not making money, they want to subsidize this kind of propaganda. So, well, okay, what's in the book? Well, they went and asked Stanford University French professor about this, and they're familiar with the book and they explain it this way. This book is racist in the literal sense of the term. It uses race as the main characterization of characters. It describes the takeover of Europe by waves of immigrants that wash ashore like the plague. Okay, that sounds pretty bad. It's about to get worse. Back in 1975, Kirkus Reviews did a review of this book when it first came out. Here's how they described it. They said, the publishers are presenting the Camp of the Saints as a major event, and it probably is, in much the same sense that Mein Kampf was a major event. Damn. Okay, wow. I'm gonna tell you the plot in a second, you'll make up your own mind. One last quote from a reviewer. In this case, it's actually a political figure, Linda Chavez. She worked under Ronald Reagan, she worked under George W. Bush, deeply conservative, deeply right-wing. Nonetheless, she says about the book, because it is true, quote, it is a really shockingly racist, and to have the counselor to the president see this as one of his touchstones, I think says volumes about his attitude. Now, I never heard of this before, and I read those quotes about the reviews before I knew what the plot of the book was. I was like, shockingly racist. I don't know, it's after covering the news for over 20 years, after covering these guys for a couple of years, hard to shock me. So let's see if it's actually shocking. Well, it turns out the plot of the book is about 800,000 Indians are coming to France as immigrants, as refugees, because they're impoverished. They're led by a figure that is called the Turd-Eater. He literally eats crap in this book. He is the leader of in this case, Indians, but really non-Western world overall. Okay, now then the book says, all right, are the French going to have the courage to do the right thing? Oh, okay, what's the right thing? To murder all of them. No, not to block the ship and not let it come into France because they're worried about the population or the environment or whatever. No. The right thing in the book is to murder 800,000 immigrants who are impoverished and seeking help. Wow, you know what? That is actually shockingly racist. So the main hero of the book is a right-winger who murders immigrants and also murders people on the left who try to help immigrants. That's the hero of the book. Okay, I'm going to go back to Blumenthal here for a description of some of the things that happen in the book. He says, poor black and brown people literally overrun Western civilization in this book. Chinese people pour into Russia. The Queen of England is forced to marry her son to a Pakistani woman. Egads. The mayor of New York must house an African-American family at Gracie Mansion. Look at that worldview. To them, having black people at Gracie Mansion is like unthinkable. Like he's forced to house them. Well, as it turns out in real life, he's not forced to house them. He houses them anyway because he's married to an African-American. And his family is obviously African-American. So, wow, that came true. What a horror story. But if you're deeply racist, that is a horror story. To be forced to marry a Pakistani woman, oh my God, and to house African-Americans. This is what Steve Bannon thinks is such a great book in his guide for immigration. These people are nuts. I'm not anywhere near done. Get a load of this. This explains a lot. They refer to the left that actually believes that we shouldn't be racist and that we should help people across the world as their culturally cuckolded white supporters. I don't know if that's where this whole cuck craze began, but that is a quote from the book about these guys who want to help other human beings, cucks. Okay, next time you use it, understand at least partly where it came from. The book glorifies colonial wars of conquest and the formation of the Ku Klux Klan, in case you were confused as to whether it was racist enough. And then how does it describe brown people in the book? Well, in the case of the boat of immigrants, they say that they were, of course, hypersexualized. It's another old racist stereotype trope. They say there were everywhere rivers of sperm, streaming over bodies, oozing between breasts and buttocks, and thighs and lips and fingers. As usual, they're obsessed with sex from people of different skin colors. And they say it's terrible, oh, the oozing sperm. Let me tell you more and more about it. Very par for the course for deep racists, like the person who wrote this book and the person who celebrates this book, which is, of course, Steve Bannon. And finally, let me give you a sense of the main protagonist of this book. As Huffington Post explains, as he talks to the hippie he will soon kill, Calgo, that's the hero, explains how the youth went so wrong. That's, quote, that scorn of a people for other races, the knowledge that one's own is the best, the triumphant joy at feeling oneself to be part of humanity's finest. None of that had ever filled these youngsters' addled brains. So if you're not a racist and you don't hate the other races, your brain has been addled. You've been cuckolded by people who actually care about other human beings. This is chief advisor to the President of the United States. He nonstop praises this book and says it's a warning for what might happen. By the way, you know what else happens in the book when the immigrants finally land in France? In their mind, in the book, that triggers and was meant to trigger the rest of the world overthrowing the Western powers. Because then they view that as the weakness of white people, that they would accept other people, and hence they must be overthrown and murdered and killed. Because it is a classic case of projection. Since we murdered, conquered, took over, abused, we assume they must have the same secret plan. So that is why Steve Bannon constantly talks about immigration, not in terms of helping the poor, the needy, but talks about it in terms of an invasion, as this book, The Camp of the Saints, does. In fact, now let's go back to Bannon in April of 2016. He says, the refugee crisis didn't just happen by happenstance, which again is a different kind of mental statement. What do you mean it didn't happen by happenstance? Do you mean that the non-Western world planned to pretend to have a war in Syria and pretended that the civil war was so terrible that it caused 4 to 5 million people to be displaced, but actually it's a secret plot by the brown people to come into France and Germany and America and take it over in their secret invasion? Lunatics. And then he continues in that same statement. These are not war refugees. It's something much more insidious going on. absolute freaking lunatic. He thinks that there's this giant conspiracy where these immigrants are not actually running from their war-torn area. What, everybody made that up? It's like the moon landing, it never happened. Everything's just total fantasy. There is no civil war there. Iraq didn't actually happen, none of this happened. It's actually a plot by the brown people to take over our culture, our beloved white culture. In fact, in June of 2016, he says to, oh, by the way, Jeff Sessions of all people, in another interview, do you believe that elites in this country have the backbone, have the belief in the underlying principles of the Judeo-Christian West to actually win this war, referring to immigration? In his mind, this is a war, and he thinks it's brown people versus white people, Western civilization versus non-Western, and the answer is that you win the war. How do you win a war? Well, as the Camp of the Saints explained, you murder them all. Chief advisor to the President of the United States. I have to confess that Linda Chavez was right. He is shockingly racist. Even I had no idea how racist he was. Corporate media is awesome.
Wrong.
Independent media is the way to go.
Believe me, believe me.
Support independent media right now. Become a Young Turks member. TYTnetwork.com/join.